Hi, everyone. My name is Kirk Bachman, and welcome back to The Ultimate Dish. I am thrilled to be speaking with the one and only Nancy Silverton. That's right. I said Nancy Silverton. Nancy's the co-owner of Pizzeria Mozza in Los Angeles and Newport Beach, as well as Osteria Mozza, Mozza to Go, SPACCA in Los Angeles. And she's also the creative mind behind Nancy's Fancy Gelato. Before this, Nancy founded the legendary La Brea Bakery and the beloved Campanile restaurant, a cornerstone of Los Angeles dining for decades. Throughout her illustrious career, Nancy has worked with some of the most influential chefs in the nation, including Jonathan Waxman at Michael's Restaurant and Wolfgang Puck at Spago. She's also mentored countless chefs who have become successful restaurateurs. Early on, Nancy was recognized as Food and Wine magazine's best new chef. In 2014, she received the James Beard Foundation's highest honor as Outstanding Chef. That same year, she was named one of the most innovative women in food and drink by both Fortune and Food and Wine magazines. Nancy has also authored 11 cookbooks, including Breads from the La Brea Bakery, the Mozza Cookbook, and her latest release, The Cookie That Changed My Life. We'll talk about that today. In 2017, she was featured on Netflix documentary series Chef's Table. Stay tuned for an engaging conversation with a true culinary trailblazer. You won't want to miss this episode. And there she is. Good morning. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm out of breath already, Nancy. Can I just tell you? I'm out of breath. How are you?
Good. Thank you.
You know, before we dive into everything, I'm going to say I heard through the grapevine, but I read through the grapevine that you've been traveling. I'm stalking you on social media, but I believe travels to London, Spain. Wow. Any behind the scenes tips on what's going on with all the travel? And did you come across some great food?
Well, I always come across great food, but just to kind of add to my bio a little, I now have 4 restaurants outside the country. I have one in London and Saudi, Mexico, and Singapore. And so my travels twice a year take me to those countries as well. So this last trip I took started out in London because I had a week's worth of work to do at my restaurant in London. And then it just so happened I was lucky enough to be hosted by one of our purveyors, Chef's Warehouse, who took myself and our chef, 2 of our chefs, on a small little food junket in Spain, which was fantastic, and then wound up stopping off on our way home in Paris for 2.5 days because I was asked to cook for a quote unquote experience for 10 guests at the Palace of Versailles. So I cooked at the Palace of Versailles, ran around Paris and ate for a couple of days and came back home. So that was a really great 3-country trip in kind of less, about just 2 weeks. And highlight. Any of you out there that have not heard of the restaurant, and I'm going to say it wrong because my pronunciation is so bad, but it's outside of it's in Spain, outside of San Sebastian. It's called Echabari, and a little town outside of San Sebastian where the most humble man. Actually, he was on it. Oh, no. I'm sorry. He wasn't on a Netflix did a series on fire-based food cooking. I don't know if you saw that one. It was one of the most recent. And they featured a chef from Australia who actually used to cook at Escoffier. And anyway, just the most humble man that cooks in a small little very modest kitchen where he has a few different grills going, where he is able to maintain the specific temperature he wants to grill certain items. And when you eat there, what a treat. It's sort of like 6 or 7 courses of kind of simple, just beautiful fish dishes, and then the meal culminates with a fantastic steak that he cooks, and one of the most brilliant meals I've ever had. So put that on your bucket list.
I will. I will. I have some friends that are going to San Sebastian in
Oh,
August. So I'm definitely going to put that on their bucket list. Coming back to it's not on the script, but I love the idea. So, can you talk a little bit more about that cooking experience that you were involved in? Um, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the Aspen experience. I do you think people are looking for food experiences that they can share with others more than ever before?
yep. I'm noticing that more and more. It's interesting. And I feel like I started hearing that word kind of around 2020 when a lot of sort of food events obviously came to a halt. And the world kind of immediately switched in all areas, but definitely the food world as well, to online
Mm-hmm.
experiences. So I know that where I had previously traveled across the country doing different kinds of dinners for different kinds of charities, um, locally and around the country, and that kind of switched online. Somebody got the brilliant idea of, well, look at if we can't do it in person, let's do it on Zoom. And I did so many cooking classes online with different, again, charities. We did a lot of events where we actually made food at our restaurant, boxed it up, sent some of it out locally, some actually across the country. And then people would receive their boxes and we would cook together
Oh, I love that.
online, right? And they started calling them food experiences. And I think kind of an outgrowth of that, look at in life, everybody's looking for the next best thing. Let's do something better, different, right? And I think out of that, people were really kind of rethinking how to have events. And all of a sudden, these food experiences started happening. I know that one of the food experiences that I've been doing quite a bit of are people have been hosting events in my backyard. So rather than saying, okay, we have a charity and we're raising money for, this organization, and this is how much the tickets are going to cost, and we're going to do 100 people, let's charge more, let's do less, and let's let people do it in your backyard where they actually come to your house. They feel like they're eating at your house. Well, they are eating at my house, and it's a much more intimate experience. So that's an example of one of the food experiences that I've done quite a few at my house. But then I'm also noticing that people are putting together these events. Like, for instance, this was a woman's 50th birthday. Now, she happened to, also be able to afford the party of inviting 10 of her friends, where she flew them kind of around the world and had a different experience in a few different countries. And one of them was cooking in Versailles. So there is a lot of bragging rights behind it, right? But it also, well, for someone like me, it brought me to Paris, and it brought me, and it allowed me to cook at the Palace of Versailles, where only a few people have ever cooked before. So it was
Yeah,
an experience for me as well.
I just think it's fabulous. Staying on that topic a little bit here in Boulder, in Colorado, the idea of farm dinners,
Mhm.
also intimate
Yep.
farm dinners, where there really isn't a set menu because we're waiting to see what's going to be harvested. It really, it creates community. It creates emotion, and I absolutely love it. I saw something, we chatted about it before we got started today, but I saw something on Instagram where you're coming to the Aspen Food and Wine Festival. Yay.
Yep.
But I'd never seen like this, and I'll let you explain a little bit more of it. But folks can actually hop on the plane and fly with you as you travel to Aspen. Tell me a little bit more about that. And I got to figure out how I'm going to get to LA so I can get on that flight.
And get on
But
that flight, yes.
fascinating.
Right. So, obviously there are small planes that fly to, a handful of not too far destinations. I know that the jet that I'm working with also flies to, I know it does Aspen, and I think it does Vail, it does Cabo, and probably somewhere else, but that's their route, right? And so they got the idea to have me curate a meal on board for 14 or 16 people that will be flying to Aspen. And, look at what a great way to fly if you can that way, where you don't have to go through TSA and you don't have to go through the rest of what tends to be kind of a nightmare when you when you travel. You just go to they're always small airports, right? You drive right up, get on. And so this is the first time I'm doing something like that. But again, another food experience. Look at people love food and people love to use food as a vehicle for entertainment, right? And obviously sustenance and everything else that goes along with it. But it's going to be really, really fun. So we curated this small little meal. Obviously, we can't cook on board because these small planes don't really have anything but a very small, oven to reheat. But we made a nice little brunch menu, and we'll see. And I hope it's not too bumpy in that small plane.
Well, it reminds me of a story. This is years ago. Kenny Loggins was a, kind of a star when I was growing up, and he had a place in Aspen, and um, I was at the Denver airport, also flying to Aspen, and I got to fly on this flight with Kenny Loggins and his entourage and stuff. And yeah, it's a little bumpy, but they're so wise with the winds and
Yeah.
nobody's going to be at risk. It's going to be a lot of fun. The mountains are absolutely beautiful. Chef, your culinary journey, it's been incredibly inspiring to many, myself included. As a student of the craft, I'll call myself, right. Can you share? And like I said before we got started, many students will be listening to your words, so no pressure. But can you share a pivotal moment, and we'll get to your growing up and all that in just a bit, but a pivotal moment or experience, using that word again, that significantly shaped your, let's say, approach to food and more so cooking and baking?
I think there was really two pivotal moments. And well, they were both early on in my career, I have to say. But the first one was after dropping out of college in my senior year, realizing that I did want to be a cook, and I didn't, I had no desire to really finish school, even though I was in my senior year. I didn't need a degree. There was nothing I was going to do with a degree. And so I went to cook um, at a restaurant. I chose a restaurant that was closest to me in Northern California that I felt was sort of one of the most reputable restaurants in that area. And I went to work there. I knew it was going to be a little over a year because I signed up to go to cooking school in London at the Cordon Bleu. And it was a year and a half waiting, close to a year and a half waiting list. So I started cooking at this restaurant, and it was it was very compatible to just intuitively how I thought about food. Now, at that time, I really didn't have any kind of I didn't really know my style, or I didn't have a style, right? I didn't even think of whether it was going to be an international style or it was going to be American, or if I wanted to be a hotel cook or a caterer. I didn't really think anything. I just knew I wanted to cook. So the restaurant I chose to work at was a restaurant that was run by the owner, who's the chef, was self-taught, college educated. He cooked his menus out of cookbooks, and I love what we were cooking. But while I was there, I went to eat at Chez Panisse restaurant in Berkeley, and I think that's that's a restaurant that I don't even need to tell you what it is, because hopefully everybody that's listening to this podcast knows what Chez Panisse is. But this was back in 1976. So it was sort of early-ish on in the life of Chez Panisse. I forget when it opened. I think it just had its 45th birthday or something like that. But
Amazing.
or
Yeah.
50th birthday. But anyway, it was pretty early-ish on. But I remember sitting down at that meal, I had heard about this restaurant. It didn't have the cachet that it has now, but I had heard of it. And I went to eat there. And I don't remember what I ate, but I remember so clearly thinking, "Oh, I get it. This is what food should be about. This is what the dining experience should be about. This is the kind of food I want to cook." And I don't think I ever veered off that path. I never changed and said, "You know what? From now on, I think I really want to learn how to, let's say, for lack of a better word, dabble in molecular gastronomy." I never, my interest right then and there was simple, flavorful, seasonal, respectfully sourced, and I knew it right away, and that's has been it. So I think that was definitely a pivotal moment to be able to so early on establish one's style, right? And then I think the second probably pivotal moment was when I started to work at Michael's restaurant. And I think this is key to your students, because I think for myself, my success, if I had to say, how are you successful? What happened? I think mine was all about timing. It was all about being at the right place at the right time, no matter what it was. But key is to be open to all possibilities. So Michael's was a restaurant that I wanted to work at, and I wanted to be a line cook there. I wanted to cook savory, but at that time there was no openings in savory. So actually, when I first got the job there, I went to interview. I had met Michael the night before, because Michael is the owner of the restaurant. I met Michael the night before, and I told him that I would really love to work at his restaurant. I had come back from the Cordon Bleu, and he said, "Come the next day and meet our manager, Carl." And Carl was not a kitchen manager; he was the general manager of the restaurant. And he was very desperate to have somebody relieve him on his lunch shift that involved working on the computer and taking orders. I'm not going to bore you with what it did, but it was so far away from whatever I wanted to do. And he said that's what he would like to hire me as. And I was like, thought about it. I could have said, no, I want to be in the kitchen. But I somehow knew that you need to get your foot in the door. Just get your foot in the door in the place you want to be, and you will find where your home in that restaurant. And that's what I did. I worked there only really for a month or so, and I was terrible at what I did. But then the next opportunity given to me by Jonathan Waxman, when he found out that why I was so bad at what I was doing was because that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in the kitchen. He said, "I need you to work in the pastry department. We're about to lose our pastry chef. I need you to learn everything you can from him." And pastry was also not where I wanted to be in the kitchen. At the Cordon Bleu, pastry was a struggle for me. I didn't do well in it, and I really didn't have any interest in making pastries. But again, it was one step closer to the stove,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
so I took that position, and as we know, I fell in love with it, and that really became my passion. So those, I think, were two really pivotal moments for me, finding my style and realizing how important it is to just, really take advantage of an opportunity, and it'll work out in the end. And I think that that's key. And it did work out for me.
And I love that memory. I love that stories serendipitous timing, right?
Yep.
Ironically enough, the conversations around Chez Panisse, I mean, that's a whole nother podcast. We could talk for hours, right? In the early days when we brought Escoffier education to the United States, Jeremiah Tower was on our board and,
Hmm.
provided a lot of direction and feedback. And um, ironically enough, I'd love for you to talk more about your experience with Cordon Bleu in London. I'm not sure we talked about this yet, but I spent about 15 years of my career working with the with the Le Cordon Bleu organization, bringing some of their schools to America for a period of time. But um, really fascinating organization. What was that time like for you away, from family, let's say, and such in London?
Let me just tell you how I got there to the Cordon Bleu, because first of all, I was so naive back then in when I again chose my career path of being a cook. I didn't even know that there were schools in the United States. I mean, the Culinary Institute in America, and and Johnson and Wales, and many schools. I didn't even know they were available or a choice, or I didn't even know that people went to school to cook. So
Sure.
when I told my parents that I was going to be dropping out in my, by the way, second semester of my senior year. So really all I had to do was take finals and write a paper, which I didn't want to do. I was a little bit nervous. They were professional. My father was a lawyer, my mother was a television writer. So they were snobby. They could have said, "How dare no child of mine is ever going to cook," because again, back then, cooking does not have or did not have the prestige that it has now. I think I run into parents of small children and they say, "My kid wants to be a cook when they grow up," and they're so proud and excited about that. That wasn't the case then. But anyway, my parents, rather than being disappointing or scolding or saying what a parent probably should have said is, "You've got one semester left. Just get your degree and then do what you want." They were so supportive. And my father said, "Just do me a favor. I want you to go to the Cordon Bleu." I didn't even know what that was. So
Isn't that
I
amazing?
know. So this was in London. I said, "Okay, I'll do that. Go to cooking school." Go to London for 6 months, right? On my own, as I don't know how old I was, 19, 18, 19-year old. I don't know. How old are you when you're about a senior? Something,
About
20,
that? Yeah,
about
very
that.
young, very
Before
young.
21, let's say. So there I went. I went off to London and I went to school, and I just loved the discipline. I was very, very serious in what I did. I wasn't a great student, by the way. In those days at the Cordon Bleu, it's changed very much since then, and I'm not sure how it was in France. I didn't go to France, by the way, because I didn't speak French, and I think at that time there was only a London campus and a French and one in Paris. I don't think there was any in
I
United.
think
There
you're right.
definitely
Yeah.
wasn't any
Yeah.
here. Anyway, um, it was a little bit primitive then, meaning we every day there was a half a day worth of lecture, and that was demonstrations and a note taking. But then there was always that half a day worth of cooking, and for the cooking we were paired up in twos in a very, very tiny kitchen with, like, I think it was two burners of very uh home style cooking burners, no restaurant quality, very very simple equipment, no exotic ingredients whatsoever. And but what I learned was the basics, um and I think that that really is kind of what school is all about. And is that the advantage of going to a cooking school rather than just getting a job at a restaurant, although they're both very important. And not to say one is necessarily more important than the other. However, in cooking school, they bring you up from the beginning and they teach you from the beginning, from whatever that is, how to make a mayonnaise, a stock, a mother sauce. And that's something that in today's cooking world is missing. And it's missing because so many restaurants these days, and I think mainly because one is not allowed to work anymore 20 hours a day at a restaurant. One is only allowed, without overtime and things like that, an 8-hour shift. So kitchens are really divided into two parts: a prep kitchen, are the people that do the prep work, and the line cooks that come in and cook the food. So it's the line cooks that miss out on so much of their culinary education because they don't do it anymore. And so I feel very lucky that although I'm rusty at a lot of the things that I learned because I don't do them anymore, and it's something that you need to do all the time, at least I have the understanding of where they come from. And I think that that's something you only get from a cooking school.
So well said. So well said. And will be so beautifully resonated by our students. Along the same lines, Chef, in your opening statements on the Netflix episode, you state, and I quote, "You have to be obsessed to be a baker."
Yeah.
I would love for you, because I agree that passion plays into that, but obsession is, and in the series you go on with some explanations or illustrations of what obsession means. But would you mind sharing a little bit more? Because I think our students will hang on every word. Define that obsession and the beauty in that obsession in being a baker.
And by the way, it's not only the beauty, but it's the ultimate satisfaction when you finally
Oh, well
get to
said.
pat
Yeah.
yourself on the back and say, you know what? I got there. Um,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
so I have to also say that I've never seen the Netflix episode because I've never watched myself on TV or listened to myself on the
Well, I'm
radio.
telling you, it's
So,
fabulous. Fabulous.
so I'm not quite sure what I said, but I think that, and when I said, and I don't just mean it in bread baking, but I probably was talking about that as the obsession then. But I can um, jump ahead really quickly, and I know you wanted to talk about it a little bit about my the new book, well, new as of last November that I just did, and I did become obsessed in that baking book. There's no bread in that book. Well, there is a focaccia, but I did become obsessed in that book in setting myself the goal and challenging myself to make what I thought would be the very best version of desserts that we all already know. So whether it's
Hmm.
a blueberry muffin or a pineapple upside down cake. So there was a lot of obsession in there because just good enough was not good enough for me. It had to be, all right, that's the best version of that I ever tasted. But I think in that Netflix episode, I was talking about bread because bread, well, there's so many components, or sorry, I shouldn't say components. There's so many elements that in the end make up for a good bread, but they're so subtle and even in the way my mind thinks, I don't understand them all. And I'm talking about from a scientific way. So I'm talking about temperature, and I'm talking about activity of, say, a sourdough starter or yeast. I'm talking about steam. I'm talking about humidity in the air. I'm talking about new crops of flour that vary all the time. So there's so many elements that come into making a loaf of bread that make it challenging. And so I think what a baker needs to know is what they want to end up with before they even start, and then not to give up until they get there. And so let's suppose they're saying, well, I want my bread to have a crust color like this. I want the oven spring to be like this. I want the interior crumb to look like this. I want it to taste like this. I want the chewiness or the texture of the crust to be this. But really understand what it is that you're looking for and then not stop until you get there. Now, I know that it's a lot of hard work and there's a lot of setbacks. And it's really easy to say, oh, that's good. I think that's good enough. But what you have to be is really, really critical and again, not stop until you get there. And I think that when I started making bread back in 1989, I think that to my advantage, but it was also a lot of hard work, was that at that time, which doesn't seem really that long ago. It wasn't like it wasn't like a generation ago, or several generations ago. It was in 1989. It was still of this century. But then there were not a lot of bread books out there. Now there's thousands. I mean, they're so good
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
like every day I get another one to write a blurb about, right? But there's so many great bread books out there. There's so many bakeries to learn from and there's so many people to talk to. and so many classes to take. That wasn't available then. So I really do have to say I was self-taught. I mean, I was able to go to France right in the beginning of my trying to figure out how to make the loaf of bread that I wanted to make. And I took a 5-day baking class back at the school where I had gone years after the Cordon Bleu to Lenote School outside of
Sure,
Paris.
sure.
And I did
Yeah.
take a 5-day baking class, which helped some. But again, it's just bread is so tricky because of the flours and the environment. And it just changes everything. So you can't just take a recipe from somebody else and put it in your kitchen and make that same loaf of bread. But so I really did have to teach myself, and every day it was many experiments, many trials, and many failures.
Well, a couple of key things there. It's great to have these sort of chats, and sometimes people, students, we forget the years and years of work and
And
the
the
attempts to.
and I have to say, the still years of work, because I am still
Sure.
learning all the time. And I love it. That's what keeps me going, is that I haven't learned it all. And there's still
No,
one more thing for me to learn. And then the next day there's one more. And I love it when I learn it too.
and aren't we the best teachers, the best versions of ourselves as teachers
Yep.
when we too are learning?
Yep.
Knowledge is everywhere today.
Yep.
I've asked I've asked my instructors now for years, because students used to come, like when you went to Cordon Bleu, you went there because that's where knowledge was kept. But knowledge is everywhere today. So our
Yep.
educators merely need to be facilitators of knowledge. Our students have
Yep.
great things to say, great things to share.
Not only great things to say and share, but also great things to teach. I've learned so much from the from someone that just started out, and they have some
Right?
little teeny
Yeah.
trick that they did somewhere, and it's like, oh wow, I love that.
And I do too. I totally agree. Nancy, LA Magazine named you as LA's most prolific and long-standing culinary
It's only because
innovators.
I'm old, I always say, because
No, no,
when you start to get those
humility. I
awards,
love it. I
it's
love
like,
it. I love it. I'm going to keep coming with accolades, right? Many say that you're the key architect of today's artisan bread movement.
well,
I
again,
read
it's
that
timing. It's timing because
it's,
you know because look at when La Brea Bakery opened in 1989, and people started to write about it. I would read these things in articles, newspapers or magazines that I created. I did not create bread. Bread was
no,
around. I'm not that old. Let's put it that way. I did not create bread, but again, it was timing. It was that we the country, the world was ready for great bread, and I just happened to be there to make a loaf. You know what I'm saying? It's not. It could have been somebody else, and that's and I
but
say
it
that
wasn't.
really
But it
also.
wasn't.
Okay,
It
it
was
wasn't, but
you. It was
I
you.
say that also about like Spago. I think that I was at Michael's, which was at that time, and it's still around, by the way. Michael's just celebrated its 45th birthday. Michael's restaurant in Santa Monica. Um, when I was at Michael's, and it was a very popular, trendy. That's the place everybody wanted to be. So it was a really great place for me. But when Wolfgang opened Spago, and I didn't even know Wolfgang, he wasn't a friend of mine, and obviously I didn't have a crystal ball to say, oh, but Spago one day is going to be this. I did take the chance of leaving Michael's and opening up the pastry department, because at Michael's I was only as the assistant pastry chef. I had an opportunity to be the pastry chef, right? But had I not been at at Spago and being able to ride on the coattails of Wolfgang, who knows? I could have just gone anywhere and just kind of been lost in the masses. So again, it's just about timing, luck, opportunity, um, and that's really what I have to thank. And that whole bread, the whole bread movement. Yes, I was one of the early ones, but I like to say that my when I went to France in 1979 to go to Lenote, pastry school, not bread, but pastry school. And Michael's restaurant had sent me there, which was a wonderful opportunity. A friend of mine from college was living there. And when I got there, he threw me, I think, on the back of his motorcycle and took me to Poilâne Bakery in Paris, probably one of the world's most famous bakeries in Paris. And he said, I want you to try this bread. And he took me there. And there you can, they do a few different kinds of bread, or several different kinds, but one of their most famous is one called a miche, which is a giant loaf, which you can buy by the weight, which is great. So we bought whatever, a quarter of a kilo of bread, and I remember ripping into it. I remember thinking, okay, I've never tasted anything like it. One day I would love to make bread like this. But being in France for 6 months, everybody around me said, oh, you'll never be able to make bread like that. You can only make bread like that in France. You don't have the right flour. You'll never be able to do it. So I kind of accepted that until I came back to Los Angeles and went up to Berkeley, where a former dishwasher, or busser at Chez Panisse, who started while he was at Chez Panisse baking bread and went on to open his own bakery, Acme Bakery, which opened before La Brea Bakery by a couple years. I had heard of it, and I went up and I tried his bread, and I'm like, okay, this is like Poilâne. It can be done in this country. And so, he sort of solidified the idea that, yes, I can make that bread one day. And it was him that really was the I just got more publicity than he did, but he really was the beginning of what was, I would say, the artisanal bread movement in the United States.
I just absolutely love that genuine story. I read, and maybe we've been talking about Cordon Bleu a little bit, and I read that Julia Child once tried your brioche tart, I believe,
Yes.
with the hot wine syrup, and it made her cry. True story.
True story. And interestingly enough, I never did it again. I mean, that was a dessert I was making in those days at Campanile. And after Campanile, I sort of thought, okay, I've done that. It was a great dessert. And I kind of left it in my bag of tricks, right? And just last week, I thought, you know what? I think I need to bring that dessert out again. That was a great one. And yes, it did. It made her, it brought tears to her eyes, and she said, "This is a dessert worth crying for. Can't do any better than that."
No, absolutely,
Because that's what food's about. Food's about emotion. That dessert must have taken her to some place,
a memory, right?
where yeah, exactly. That was very sentimental, and
Just like Ratatouille. Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, just like Ratatouille.
Can you talk to us a little bit about leading up to that? Were you a curious baker or foodie growing up at all?
Nothing. Not at all. Not curious, not even
Isn't that
interested
something?
in it, not yeah, and my mother loved to cook. As I said, she was a, television writer. She wrote, and a short story writer, and she wrote from home, but cooking the family dinner, a nutritious family dinner every night, was key to how she wanted to lead our family, but also it was key to me growing up, because I have to say that family dinners are rare. I think family dinners came back around 2020, when people were home and eating again, and people thought, wow, this is nice. And maybe people are still carrying on that lost tradition, that because they realize what a special moment, at the table is. And it's funny, right now I'm talking to you and I'm looking down at the table I'm talking to you at, and this is the table that I grew up in. So
Oh, isn't that something?
yeah.
Wow.
I took off the white stain, so it's the natural
It's still
walnut
part
now,
of you.
but it
Yeah.
is my table. And it was a table, well, it had leaves, so it'll fit 6, but we kept it at 4 because there was my sister and my mother and my father, and every night we sat down together at 6:30 at night, no matter what, and we all had our places. We all sat at the seats that we sat at every night, and that is where it was, family time. I heard about what my father, his trials in court. He was a litigator and he loved it. What my mother was writing, but most important, politics. My parents were very, very political. And I just learned so much at that table. And I also took it a little bit for granted. I knew that that's how my family uh, lived, but I would go over to some other families because I grew up in the era of TV dinners where a lot of families switched from tables to eating in front of the television on TV
Yeah.
trays, right? And I would go to a lot of friends' house, and there were those metal TV trays lined up in front of the television, and there was the family in front of the television, right? And so, where food was not important for me growing up, just because my tastes were very simple and my mother's tastes were a little bit more eclectic, but sitting at the table is something that was instilled. The importance of sitting and the joys of sitting at a table were instilled in me very early on. And to this day, my favorite part of life is to be at a table with family and friends with food and conversation. And that is probably where my love of what I ended up loving to do was that gathering. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't food. I really had no interest in food.
Well, what I love so much about that story, and it's not even a cliche. My wife and I were talking about this the other night as our children's, let's say, um, activities change with age, right? We, pizza night tends to be Friday night, but now we're kind of trying to shift that to Sunday, maybe earlier in the day so that we can stay together. So even if you're not really interested in food, food still brings you together. There's a purpose
Yes.
to
Yeah.
come
Oh yeah.
to the table where you're sitting right there. I just I'm so glad that you said that. I young people need to hear more of that. Come
Yep.
together, learn about politics, learn about the world through the lens of your family. There's no
Yep.
greater thing. Um, I wanted to make sure that we talked a little bit about what it takes to be an entrepreneur. La Brea Bakery, 1989. It's not just incredible skill, but there's entrepreneurial um, energy that comes with running a business and managing employees that can be exhausting while rewarding, right? And I'd love if you could, speak to our audience a little bit about, how you balance this incredible skill that you have, but yet running a business that the bills get paid and that you source the best ingredients and that people keep coming back, which they did with your businesses for years and years and years and years. I think it's a great lesson for our students.
Well, I think, one thing I recognized really early on is to let the people that do the things that you don't do well hand it over to them. So for instance, let's say, okay, look at having a restaurant or having a business is not a hobby, right? And so have somebody that's able to manage those numbers and that money do it. I mean, I didn't even attempt to do it, right? Because it's just something that is, my mind doesn't work that way. So I think key in growing a business, right, is to recognize the things that you're good at and the things that you need to let go of, and to let go of them in a way that you don't micromanage. Give those people that you've given that you've handed off some of those tasks, let them feel like it's their part of the business, so let them feel empowered. Don't try to micromanage, and
Mm-hmm.
I think I learned that really early on.
You know, um, Along those same lines, sort of related, sort of not related, how important do you believe? You spoke a little bit about how mentorship. We didn't say that word, but there were some people that mentored you as you found your way. how do you feel, how important is mentorship to young people today that are coming in the industry? You know, they have energy, they have ideas, they have knowledge because they're gaining knowledge, but the mentorship is so important. I would say, in my opinion.
It is, and it's something that gives me such satisfaction. Just like a parent, like, so for instance, I don't know how many kids you have, but I'm sure you want your kids to succeed in life and maybe even succeed better than
Let's
you
hope
exceed,
so.
whatever
Let's
that could
hope
be,
so,
right?
right?
And I think that that's how I feel about the people that I raise as well. Nothing makes me more proud than to see them succeed. Now, I know there's other people out there that hate it, that when employee, let's say, or that have worked for somebody for a while and then they leave, they never want to talk to them again. They hate them and they
It
wish them the
happens all the
worst.
time. Happens all the time.
How could you want, to want them to succeed? It's only kind of a reflection of you. It's only a reflection of what a good parent you are, that if your kids grow up and they find something that they love to do and they do well at it, right? That's what you want. You can't hope for more. So the mentorship is something that is one of my favorite parts of what I do. And I'm doing that more and more because less and less can I spend time in the kitchen, actually in the kitchen, putting out the food. And so I make it really important. It's very important for me when I'm in town that I'm at my restaurants all the time. And I'm because I'm lucky enough to the ones in or the ones in Los Angeles are 3 on the corner, not Newport Beach. It's further, but I'm really lucky that those 3 I could just be at, and I could just spend time with everybody and also help them work on something, try to inspire, drop an idea like, hey, I was just here and I had this great dish. Look at this picture. Let's do something like, trying all the time to motivate, and help them grow and help them learn how to be better cooks.
Motivation is such a great word. There's a little
Yeah.
push, there's a little pull, right? I
Yep.
absolutely love that. You know, I don't know where the time's gone, but I have a couple of questions that I've got to get in, before
Okay.
we
Get them
get to
in.
an hour here. But
Okay.
um, the latest book, The Cookie That Changed My Life, without giving anything away, because we want people to buy that book. But how did that come to fruition, and what can you share about that?
Okay. So it is the cookie that changed my life. And then because of marketing, I had to add what is it called? A subtext, like something, and over 100 other cookies, muffins, tarts, or whatever that will change your something like that. So, and the reason why is because it's not just a cookie book. So, and marketing, the marketing department of Random House came to me and said, "You can't call it the cookie that changed your life because people are going to think that it's a cookie book." And it's like, no, they won't. And sure enough, everybody comes up to me, "I just bought your cookie book," and I'm like, "It's not a cookie book." Anyway, how did it come? I'll try to say it very succinctly, but this is 2021 when I, by the way, didn't have the need as the rest of the country and world did to bake my way through sourdough bread baking. In fact, I didn't really feel the need to probably even bake. But um, Michael, who I live with, had brought back this peanut butter cookie from a local bakery, actually a bakery where the owner and baker used to work for me for years at Campanile. And the name of the bakery is Friends and Family. So he brought this peanut butter cookie, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, "Oh wow, that's a great looking peanut butter cookie." And then I tasted it, and I said, "Oh well, that's a great tasting peanut butter cookie." And then I went on to say, "I can't stand the fact that this person made a better peanut butter cookie than I've ever made." And so the competitive side of me said, "I need to make a peanut butter cookie that's better than that." Now, I say that tongue in cheek because I'm not saying mine is better. It's just different. But that was sort of the beginning. So I did this. I loved it, and then I sort of thought, I think what the world needs is a book where inside the cover are filled with recipes, and you don't have to go online and see a million versions of them, but are the recipes that you really actually want to bake at home, not laminated doughs and all those hard
Yeah.
things, but
Yeah.
simple things. But like the best of them. And so that's sort of how it came about. And so that year where the restaurants, were opening and closing, they were indoors and outdoors, but there certainly wasn't the staff or the volume of business where I actually had the time to focus. Now, given I had that idea to do today, that book wouldn't be nearly as good because I don't have the time to devote like I did then.
Well, there you go. Perfect serendipitous timing again. The theme comes.
Right. There
It's
you
all about
go.
timing, 2021.
Yeah.
Nancy, the name of our little show here is called The Ultimate Dish, and I cannot let you go. And this is the
Oh, no.
toughest question, but to come back to our conversation around being around that table that's right in front of you and memories, but in your mind, what is the ultimate dish? And it can be a memory. It doesn't have to be a specific dish.
Uh-oh, my memory or a dish I make?
Or a dish you make, either or both. I love it. She's thinking. She's thinking.
Wow, I am because I don't, because then I like it's like when someone comes into the restaurant and it says, "So, what should I order? What's your favorite
It's
dishes?"
tough,
Right? Like
right?
I don't have favorite dishes; they're all on the menu because they're supposed to be on the menu.
But I'm gonna help you.
Wow! Oh, you really? Okay, help me.
What's the first thing you had when you were 19 and you went to London to Cordon Bleu? What it because London wasn't known for great food, although they had an incredible culinary school.
How about if I switch and don't say a dish, but actually something that I bought in London? Is that
I
okay?
love it, Nancy. You're in
Okay,
charge.
because I'll tell you, it's something that it's one of my beloved tools, let's say,
Okay, I
because
love
I'm
this.
I'm a simple cook and I don't have at home. I have a freestanding mixer, but that's I think the only thing I have that plugs in. So I'm not, I'm just really I like microplanes, I like wooden utensils, and I like
I love
things
it. I
that
love it.
feel good and sturdy and beautifully crafted. So when I was at the Cordon Bleu, um, I used and also bought, and I still have the same one I bought today, although I have them in various sizes, was a beautiful ceramic mortar and pestle. And
Oh,
mortar and pestles in England um, are used, well, probably they're used everywhere. I guess in all pharmacies, that's how you made compound
sure. Yeah.
pill, right? You mortar and pestle. But in in England, because this is where this mortar and pestle is made, it's a smooth, very heavy duty. I don't know, ceramic or porcelain. I don't know what the exact, but it feels good. Um, and it's a large size mortar and pestle. And I remember that's the first piece of equipment, if it's equipment, that I bought when I was in London. I brought it home with me, and it's still my favorite thing that I own.
I absolutely love it. Listen, we've had people give us 10-course meals, acquiesce to wine, but I've yet to have someone tell us about an important kitchen tool. Brilliant. I should have expected it. I should have expected a brilliant answer. Nancy Silverton, thank you so much. My wife says hi, by the way, and
And I want to see you on that plane. Say
I,
hi
I
to her
I'm
and come on that
or
plane.
I'm driving over, or I'm driving over. I'm so excited that you're coming to Colorado. Thank you for taking the time. Our students
Thank you.
and our audience and our guests are going to love listening to your story.
I have to
Congratulations.
ask you a quick question. You being in Boulder, do you go to Denver?
Yeah, it's 36 miles away.
So, two former cooks at a restaurant, brilliant cooks, opened up a great restaurant. I haven't been there yet because last time I was there, it was opening the next day. It's a Vietnamese restaurant in Denver, and it's called Sapsua. Hard to say, Sapsua, but you need to go. Did you go?
I went 3 weeks ago. I walked right into the kitchen. The husband and wife team are
And yep,
absolutely amazing.
Anna
And
and Anthony. That's yeah,
one of my graduates, Kenny, is one of their line cooks
great.
who's just having the time of his life. It's a very small restaurant, and their food
Yep,
is absolutely beautiful.
yep. I know. and I can't wait to eat there. I think I'll be there I'm doing a dinner in Denver in October, so I finally get to go. But anyway, that's an
I love
example
that you brought that up. That is,
of
it's a
two
smaller
wonderful
world than we
people.
think, isn't it?
Yep.
I love it. I love it. Nancy Silverton, thank you so
Thank you.
much. We appreciate you.
Lovely talking to you. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Ultimate Dish Podcast, brought to you by Auguste Escoffier School of Culinary Arts. Visit escoffier.edu/podcast to find any materials mentioned during the podcast, including notes, links, and other resources. And if you can, please leave us a rating on Apple or Spotify and subscribe to support our show. This helps us reach more aspiring individuals ready to take the next step toward their dream careers. Thanks for listening.